Today in our 2018 Jeep Wrangler Unlimited, we're going to take a look at and show you how to install the REDARC Tow-Pro Elite Proportional Trailer Brake Controller. This is going to work for trailers with 1 up to 3 axles. Now to help us with our installation, we'll also be using part number ETBC7, which is our electronic brake controller installation kit. Now there are several advantages to the Tow-Pro Elite that we get here that we don't often get with standard proportional brake controllers. The user control function is, I think, a very, very good design. Basically, it's going to allow us to switch from the blue mode, which is proportional, to a green mode. That's user control. So anytime we hit our brakes when under user control, we're going to get whatever brake power setting that we have set applied to our trailer. What that means is that if we turn this to 0, in the off-road situations where we really don't want our brakes to be applied, we're not going to have any brakes, so it's not going to act like an anchor in soft ground or sand or something like that. As soon as we get to a spot, maybe we've got an extreme downhill, and it wouldn't be a bad idea to have some trailer brakes available. We can dial up to whatever setting we want, and as soon as we hit the brakes, that power is immediately going to be sent back to our trailer. Now the intensity of that LED is going to change based off of the power setting we have. You can see as we turn this down, it's going to go to more of a neutral orange into a yellow, and off will be green. As we turn it up, you can see it's going to get more and more red, indicating more and more braking power being sent back. Now regardless of which mode you choose, whether you're going to go into the user mode or proportional mode, by pressing the button, we're going to get our normal braking power being sent back, which as you can see is fully adjustable. With the blue LED on, that's going to indicate we're in a traditional proportional mode. You're going to use that in most all situations where you're traveling down the road, and it's going to have all the same benefits that we get out of a standard proportional brake controller. Now the biggest difference between proportional and time delayed is that there's not going to be any kind of a wait for the time it takes our brakes to be applied. A traditional time delay is just going to slowly bring your brake pressure up to whatever you have set. With the proportional system such as the Tow-Pro Elite, what we can do is in just normal stop and go situations where we're just tapping our brakes, it's going to sense that, just barely applies the brakes in the trailer. Normal situations, normal braking power. But the real advantage is in the emergency braking situations where we really want to get stopped quick. The brake controller senses that and gives us that immediate braking response so we can get everything slowed down safely. With a time delayed system, we stand on the brakes. It might be as much as a second before we get full braking force, and a second in those emergency situations can be pretty long. I also like the design. As you can see, it's very discreet. There's not any more of the bumping your knees on things or having to reach down somewhere trying to get to your control. You can put it right up here where it's easily accessible. Everything mounts in location, and you'll have all the feedback that you have. The color is going to indicate to you when your brakes are being applied. You've got the adjustment, so your gain, it's just going to be dialed up and down. Now the higher you set that, the more braking force will be sent to your trailer. Now unlike a lot of the traditional brake controllers, this setup's also designed to work with 12 volt and 24 volt vehicle electrical systems. Now the ETBC7 kit's going to come with a 7-pole plug and a 4-pole plug, so you really won't have any need for an adapter or anything like that. It's going to wire directly to our trailer brake wiring currently. If you decide, you can plug that in. We're going to eliminate these connections, just use some heat shrink butt connectors, but you'll also be picking up the 3 additional wires that we get with our 4-pole. We've got our blue wire, which is for the brake signal, that's sent in from the brake controller. The black wire is for our 12 volt power. And if you decide to hook it up, you've got your purple wire, that's going to be for a reverse signal. Most commonly, you'll see this used in a marine application. Now we're not going to be using the reverse wire here, so we're going to eliminate that, but we'll leave a small bit of that connected in case in the future we want to use it. Then I'm going to cut the 4-pole off. Just going to stagger out my cuts here a little bit so we can separate our butt connectors. You'll notice the blue wire and the black wire are going to have butt connectors installed on those already. We're going to switch these out for heat shrink butt connectors. Part number DW05745, just going to give us superior corrosion resistance. And for the connections for our 4-pole there, we're going to be using part number DW05744, also a heat shrink, just a little bit smaller. We'll just start going through here and get everything stripped back. Now to the green, yellow, and brown wire, I'm going to add one of our blue butt connectors. Now on the black wire and on our blue wire, we'll add our yellow connector there. And I'll show you what we're going to do with that ground so we can tie in the one we already have with our new one. Now since we want to tie in with our other 4-pole ground, I'm going to do the same thing here and add a yellow butt connector to that white wire, but hang on to that piece that you cut off. You don't want to discard that just yet. Now on our 4-pole here, just going to cut the end off. You could save a little bit if you want to use it on something else. We're going to trim ours off and then start separating our wires. Now I cut my green wire the shortest there, so that's going to be the longest one I'll have on this side. I'm just going to try to match up the lengths so our wire stays pretty neat looking. Now we're going to trim off our white wire, strip it back, and then we need to grab that piece that we trimmed off just a few minutes ago. I'm going to strip the end of it back as well. Let's twist these together and get it added into our connector. Now it's time for us to start running our duplex wire. It's going to go from our 7-pole plug up to our engine compartment. You can choose whatever route you want to go on. Just want to avoid heat sources, you want to avoid sharp edges, anything that might do damage to it. I like to run mine, I'm right here in front of the rear axle. We go right up over this cross member, over top of the spring, towards the rear of the vehicle. And we'll just bring it right back around this body mount in the back corner beside the exhaust, down here to our plug. Now we're going to use the black wire inside to go to our black wire, the white wire to go to the blue wire. So we need to cut some of that sheathing back, and of course you'll want to do that without damaging the wires inside. And we'll get these stripped back, get them added into the butt connectors. At that point, we'll use a heat gun, mini torch, or a lighter and get these shrank down just by applying a little bit of heat at a time. Now when you get these fully shrank down, you notice it almost looks like the wire is kind of magnified a little bit, and you'll see a little bit of this clear gel that comes out of the end. That'll indicate that you've got it shrank down properly. Now we're going to get our bracket attached to our 7-pole plug. Wires are going to slide right up through here. We're going to use the 4 provided screws and nuts with serrated lock washers on them to secure it. This is part number 18140. It's just a universal short bracket. See, we've attached that with the provided hardware. That's what we'll use to secure it to the vehicle. We get our holes lined up in that bracket. So we'll bring our screws right up through. Start placing our nuts on the back. We'll do that for our 3 other locations. Now if you just put your finger on the nut, you'll be able to just use your flat blade and get those tightened down. Now I don't want to tape this one up just yet. With the wires coming out of the back of the plug, we'll tape those up a good distance just to give us a nice clean appearance. Now we can get that up in our desired location. We're going to use the clamp that comes with our universal bracket there to get it secured. That just slides inside itself there. Now you'll start with your bolt tip down. You're going to bring your clamp right up on there, and then you tip that. Then when you tip that bolt down, it's going to engage those threads so that we won't have to worry about it coming apart. Then you'll want to use a 5/16 and get that tightened down. And it'll be nice and secure. I'm just going to take a couple of long zip ties at this point and just zip tie that wire up out of the way. Keep it nice and secure and keep it from moving around. Now for our ground, we're just going to use this piece of metal right here. It's bolted right to our frame. That'll give us a good attachment point for our ring terminal. We're going to use the provided, it's the larger of the self-tapping screws in the kit, the 3/8 bit driver, and create our hole. Now we'll place that self-tapper through our ring terminal and secure it so it won't move. Now as we run forward, I like to tuck in the frame rail here on the driver's side as much as possible. Just kind of guide it along, get it going the right direction there. You should be able to pull it out of a hole further forward. Now if you do go up through the frame rail, this is going to be a sensitive area because we're right here by this, you see the exhaust pipe there. So I like to hide it behind the insulating materials there on our brake line. Now we're going to pull our duplex wire on up here into the engine compartment. One thing you really want to be sure is that you've got all of the slack out. And once you're sure that you do, zip tie right off up here. That way you won't have any of this ever going down below the vehicle. Now just like we did there at the rear, it's time to take our sheathing off the rest of our wire here so we can separate them into two different pieces. All right, now the white wire we're just going to leave over here for right now. Our black wire, we're going to be running that over towards the battery. That's why we're going to get that 12-volt signal to send back to our plug. I'm just going to follow across with the wire loom here. That'll allow us to get over there and just stay pretty hidden. Now we're also going to bring the power for our brake controller across that way too, so I'm not going to do too many zip ties yet so we can do them both at the same time. Alright, now we've got our power wire run over. It's time to put our breaker in place. This essentially acts as a safeguard for us. It's a 40 amp breaker, so it's going to allow us to draw power through our plug, but if we draw too much, the breaker heats up and it kind of disconnects for a minute. Once that cools back down, makes contact again, it's going to restore our power. So it's kind of like an automatic resetting breaker. I'm going to pull the nuts off there. They've got serrated lock washers on them. Just be a little bit easier to work with. And I'm going to be tucking them down in the hole right here. You see there are two mounting tabs. We're going to have self-tapping screws to put those in place. You'll want to use a 1/4 inch bit driver or socket to secure them. And to make this a lot easier, you can get the battery out of the way. I'm going to remove the two posts with the 10mm socket. Then right here on the outside is a battery hold down. It's also going to require a 10mm socket, and you might need a little bit of an extension to get to it. With that battery out of the way, it's going to give us good access right down here to get our breaker in place. Now we're going to be using the 30 amp breaker to power our brake controller. So we'll remove the nuts and get it installed the same way, just a little bit higher. Then we'll take our power wire, once we have our breakers installed, we'll trim that off so we can make the connection. We'll be stripping that back. Going to add on one of our yellow ring terminals with the small diameter hole and get that crimped on. That's going to go right on the silver post of the 40 amp breaker. Let's secure that with our nut. Now we can take the excess wire we've trimmed off and we're going to make two jumpers. These are going to be about 18 inches long. Strip back the ends on both of these. We're going to add a small ring terminal to each one. Now each of our jumpers are going to get installed on our copper posts on our breakers here. Those will be the ones that will eventually go to our battery. Now the last wire we need to add to our breaker is going to be for powering the brake controller. With the kit, I don't think you're going to have enough wire to make that connection, so I'd recommend picking up about 8 foot of part number 12-1-1. That's going to be your 12 gauge wire, and that should ensure you have more than enough to make your connections. Just like the other three, this is going to get one of the small diameter ring terminals. This one's going to go in our 30 amp breaker on the silver post. Now we can use a 3/8 socket and tighten each of those down. Now we can grab our zip ties and really put plenty on here. I like to have some extra on hand. We get that secure, and of course the one going to our brake controller, we want to take that all the way across. The two jumpers we made, we're going to be running those right here to our battery, so we'll let those hang out for now, take care of that later. Now we're going to take the white wire, which comes from the back, and the new black wire that we added, And we're going to run it right through the grommet located just outside of the brake booster right there. It's a pretty thin material, so you can basically just push through it. Get both of them ran inside there, start making our connections there. Now it's time to get our battery put back in so we can test for the brake signal. We've got our power wire and our brake signal wire inside. The next thing we need to find is our stoplight switch. That's going to be located on top of the brake pedal. It's about hand's length up inside right here. We're going to pull this panel down to make it a little bit easier to see and work with. So we'll pull out on the top of the panel. See, that allows it to rotate down. We can pull that off. Remove the 2 bolts here. Then for our plate, we're going to lift up and pull out. You can see our wires will be located right here. Now the black tape that's around our wires, we need to start kind of pulling that back so we can get to them to test them and figure out which one we need to use. And we'll use a test light and start testing our wires. The one we're looking for is going to have power when we hit the brake pedal. Then when we release it, it's going to go away. You can see in our application, that's going to be our white wire with the tan stripe. Now we're going to splice the red wire in from our pigtail that comes with the controller into that stoplight wire. So we need to cut and strip both sides of that under the dash. On one side, I'm going to strip back about twice as far as you normally would, just because using a little bit larger butt connector, we want to give it plenty to grab a hold of. We can twist it, then we'll just double that over. On the other side we strip off, we want to twist that together with our red wire. Once we have the 2 of those joined together, we place on one of the provided yellow butt connectors and get it crimped down. Here you can see a little easier without my hands in the way. It's going to splice our white wire, splice our red wire right into it, and then each end will go into the butt connector. Now we can do a quick test with our test light. I'm going to put that in the port our red wire's on. You can see anytime the brakes are applied, that's going to get the 12-volt signal it needs. Now we can make our other connections here. Our blue wire is going to be connected to the white wire that comes all the way from the plug in the back of the vehicle. We'll connect that with the provided butt connectors. It's okay to leave a little bit of slack here. We can bundle that up and store it underneath the dash. Black wire that comes in to power the brake controller. We can trim it, strip it back, and it connects to the black wire on the back of our plug. Last wire we'll have is going to be our white wire. It just needs to go to a good ground, which the Jeep is very convenient. We've got 2 of them right here on the kick panel. So we can clamp on there our provided ring terminal. Now to secure our ground, we're going to use a 10mm socket and take one of the nuts off. Place the ring terminal we just added right over that and put it back in place. Alright, now we've got the plug that's going to go into the Tow-Pro, so we'll plug that in. Make sure it goes all the way in there, it's nice and secure. And we've also got the wire that's going to run up to our switch. So we're going to get that plugged in as well. We'll find our mounting location. I'm going to be going right in here, kind of right underneath this brace. So before I do, I want to run my plug up behind there that's going to go out to the switch that we've got. Just make it a little easier so we won't be fighting to get in there later. But we'll use a couple of self-tapping screws and get that secured. Now we're ready to grab a couple of zip ties and get everything zip tied up out of the way and cleaned up. Now for mounting our switch, we're going to be going right in this area, so we want to get this panel popped off of here. Typically if you just kind of start down here at the bottom, kind of work that edge around, you'll unsnap those clips. Just kind of rotate it out. And the wire for our switch we can bring up right beside the dash panel here, just like that. And you'll see how that's going to slide into the back, just like that. From this point, from this flush point to the back of that, we need to have room in here behind our dash for that to go. So it looks like something about right there is going to be our best option. We'll mark that here on the front. We can get our hole drilled. Now for our main hole, we're going to drill a 25/64 hole. Now we need to measure above that 2.5 millimeters. Make our mark there for our light hole. We want that to be centered above our current hole. This is going to be a 9/64 bit. Now we'll bring our switch into place. The small light right there should go in the small hole on the top. Okay. And we'll place on the collar that goes around. Then we've got our nut that's going to thread through there. We want to secure that to our switch. Then we'll get that started with our 12mm wrench there. Once we get it close to secure, we'll get everything lined up in the right position. Now we want to take our knob, we want to turn it all the way counterclockwise. We want to line up the 0 with the tab on the top and press it into position. When we turn it up, it should stop at 10, down at 0, and we want to make sure that we can press in and you hear that little click. Now the excess cable we have here, we can zip tie up out of the way. Okay, now we just want to put in the panels we removed. We can hook up our power wires out there and test out the system. Now into each of our jumpers, we can add the larger ring terminals provided in our kit. We just have to connect it to our battery post there. Use a 10mm socket. I'm going to connect it to the middle nut. Now to test it out, let's just plug our 7-pole tester or your trailer in. Make sure our lid comes down. Start by testing out the volt. We've got plenty there, up to about 13. Now let's go ahead and run through our lights and also our trailer brake. All right, we'll test out our headlights, left turn signal, right turn signal, and our brakes. Now when power is first applied to the Tow-Pro Elite, you'll notice the LED is going to flash green and blue, green and blue, green and blue. That's the active sensor inside learning the direction of travel of the vehicle. So what we need to do is just drive around until that turns solid blue. Once we have the solid blue LED on, we'll know that that active sensor has figured out the direction of vehicle travel and our brake controller is going to be ready for use. And that's going to complete our installation of the REDARC Tow-Pro Elite on our 2018 Jeep Wrangler Unlimited.